Welcome back to Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add vintage vibes to your modern life. We're your host, Gonzalo.
And Jackie, thank you for joining us today. Today we're talking about Tomorrowland, specifically the first version of the land that existed from 1955 to 1967. If you'd like to skip ahead to the topic we're covering today, we have a timestamp in our notes, or you can use the episode chapter links. But first, Gonzalo, what have you been up to?
Well, the most immediate thing is that we are 40 seconds into recording and I'm already out of coffee. But food talk-wise...
Food talk!
Oh, yes. My wife made creamed carrots.
Yes! Tell everyone about that. I want to know all about it too.
They were very
that.
vintage looking. And we had talked about creamed onions, and a big component of these are creamed onions. And then you have the carrots in it, and they're like soft carrots, but they still look like carrots. You know, like when you like overcook carrots and they're mushy?
Yes.
Not like that at all.
Were they shredded or chopped?
They were chopped, but they still had the shape. But when you touched them with the fork, they came about like a little cloud. So
was it like mostly carrots with some onions mixed in?
It was 50-50.
Nice. Yeah, when I made the deluxe creamed onions, there was grated carrot in it, but it was like 80% onion, 20% carrot.
No, this is about 50% onion, 50% carrots.
Yum. Did you love it? Are you going to make it all the time?
I want to. But also, I did spend that same week, because this was 2 weeks ago. I don't remember why, but I caramelized onions, and it takes like 45 minutes to do it right.
Yep, sure does.
And then I had some leftovers, and I put them in my scrambled eggs every morning, and it was the best thing in the world.
They freeze pretty well, too, if you ever just like want to have a stash of...
That's actually really good news, because we have forayed into planting and gardening, and one of the things that we want to do is have onions, because we eat onions, and I was like, well, this way now I can freeze caramelized onions. But yeah, we got, and they're not installed yet. The gardeners are coming to tear out the grass today. These gigantic planters, and we're talking like 4 feet wide by 8 feet, and they're like 2 feet tall.
Nice. Ooh, 2 feet is expensive to fill.
I don't. Nope.
Do you have any trees?
Nope.
With like leaves?
No, but my parents-in-law have a lot of trees.
Cool. So grab all of their leaves and fill like the first foot of your planter with that.
On it.
Do not fill... If you fill that whole thing with soil, you're going to go broke.
No. We have that, and then there's some compost later, and then there's the soil.
Also, make sure you get your compost from a nursery and not Home Depot.
Yes. Yeah.
That's for some reason the first rule. Everyone says that everywhere in like capital letters. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like, yeah, I will drive to downtown Dallas and go to the nursery.
Yeah, no, Kimmy's been doing a lot of research. We put them together yesterday, and I have like 17 million cuts in my hand from the metal. So.
Well, now's apparently the time for onions. Oh man, your garden's gonna do so much better than mine just because you live in a greenhouse, because Houston has just like the best moist weather and your plants are just gonna thrive. I'm so excited for you. Dallas is a struggle.
I want pumpkins.
But I follow an account called the Dallas Garden School, and she does really nice monthly, like, it's February, here's what you can plant, here's what you should start now, like, start these seeds indoors, transplant these to the garden, start these seeds outdoors, and like specific to Dallas weather, which is crazy because we get the world's hottest summers and crazy freezing weeks and no spring or fall pretty much, and it's just like wild.
I know nothing about gardening.
Oh man. So last year, as listeners might remember, I did my first herb garden. Well, my first real didn't kill anything herb garden. Yay me. So last year I got raised bed planters. Mine are only a foot tall. But it's apparently like the minimum amount. And it still costs $200 to fill them.
Don't say that.
So get ready to... And what's so funny is I started gardening because mint was expensive. I'm like, why am I paying $5 for this tiny little plastic container of mint when I could spend $200 and grow my own?
I'm set.
But so I grew mint, basil, thyme, rosemary, and sage, and everything lived except for the basil, which I was prepared to lose because you will lose your basil. It doesn't last
Hmm.
year over year unless you live in Houston and you can bring your plants indoors.
Yeah, but we can't bring these plants
Yeah,
inside.
I know. Like if you put your basil in a pot and put it in the garage in the winter, you could put it back outside later and actually keep the same plant year over year.
Hmm. Hmm.
But since I went in the ground, it noped right out of here as soon as we dipped below 40 degrees.
I will say though, you could just use it to make pesto.
Yeah, I know that's the thing is if I had known then what I know now, like I didn't know the last day I had with my basil plant was the last day I was going to have with my basil plant. Yeah, like I trimmed it a little, I harvested some, like I made pesto that weekend and I saved a couple like clippings in the window and water because I always do that because like if I want it fresh for salads, I just like keep it in water like a flower pot or whatever, and then
Yeah.
like um then I can just like pull leaves for whatever, and then I left the plant growing, and like 3 days later it died overnight. Like it was beautiful and bushy and perfect, and then it was 38 degrees
Hmm.
overnight, and I walked out in the morning and the whole thing was black and shriveled.
Mm.
So now I know that if the temperature is going to get to 40 at all overnight, I think I'm just going to nope. I'm just going to at 40 degrees, not even going to wait till 37. I'm just going to chop the whole thing down and make a ton of pesto and freeze it. But
There we go.
now I know that for this year. Did not know that last year. Um, but my rosemary is thriving. My sage and thyme are doing great. My mint is hanging in there by the skin of its teeth. I'm hoping it'll do better this year though. Now that I've
Especially if
kind of
that's the
learned.
reason why you're gardening.
Yes, the whole reason why I'm gardening, and it's like struggling for some reason. It anyway. I learned a lot, and I feel confident in that nothing died that I wasn't expecting to die. So I'm expanding my garden this year. I started just thinking like, oh, I'll add another 2x4 planter, but now I kind of think I want to buy all of my same planters again and just like double capacity because I'm also thinking this year now that I've committed that I like right now they're just sitting on the grass in their own like little plot with
Hmm.
like grass around it. But now I
Hmm.
think I want to do the cute thing where you like make a pathway in between them and like
That's what
make
we're
it like a
doing.
whole garden area.
Yeah.
Which I didn't want to do last year because I was also not sure I was gonna like successfully be able to keep everything alive, and then if it would be harder to get rid of it all and pretend it never happened if I like landscaped around it. Even if I don't need like a million more herbs. I am going to try flowers this year. So I think I was thinking that I'd go from herbs to vegetables, but I'm still a little intimidated by vegetables. So I think I'm going to go from herbs to flowers. So I'm going to companion plant my basil with marigolds this year because
Ooh.
apparently they help each other out and marigolds are pretty. And
Yeah.
also mosquitoes hate them.
Ooh. Okay. Maybe we'll
So
get
I
some
think that'll be
marigolds.
handy to have around.
I just can't think of marigolds without thinking of that scene from that one movie.
They're marigolds.
Look what you've done to my peonies.
That
But you
was
know
very
what?
catchy.
That movie is from the 60s, which is kind of like the 50s. In no way, shape, or form at all, except for the fact that Tomorrowland also existed in the 60s.
It sure did. A plus transition. All right, so Tomorrowland. I just thought, well, not only is this time period of Tomorrowland the time period that syncs up with our podcast conveniently, I also think it's really interesting.
It's now,
Like,
would we call it Todayland?
no, that is a struggle with Tomorrowland. Is like, how do you make something look like the future all the time? You have to update it all the time.
Hmm.
So that's always been a struggle with Tomorrowland and every Disney park. I think that they should just lean into, which they kind of have done, uh, just lean into the retro
Hmm.
aesthetic and be
Hmm.
like this instead of just being like this is the vision of the future from us looking forward. Be like this is the vision of the future in 1955, and
Right.
just always look like what the 1950s thought the 1980s would look like.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably the best way to do it. But anyway, that was not the original concept. The original concept, of course, was looking to the future because Walt loved to look to the future. In fact, when Disneyland opened on July 17th, 1955, Walt dedicated Tomorrowland with these words. Quote, a vista into a world of wondrous ideas signifying man's achievements, a step into the future with predictions of constructive things to come. Tomorrow offers new frontiers in science, adventure, and ideals, the atomic age, the challenge of outer space, and the hope for a peaceful and unified world. Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
But anyway, so today we're talking about, like I mentioned before, the original Tomorrowland as it existed from the opening of Disneyland Park until the overhaul in 1967. That's right, in 1967, Walt decided to rebuild and update the entire land. Because
Nice.
of this, almost all of the attractions we're going to talk about today no longer exist, but I think that's what makes it so interesting.
And
It's like,
also important.
yes, like all of these, they put so much work into all of the stuff, and a lot of it he was just like, nah, not cool enough. Let's do it
Hmm.
again in
Yep.
1967. So,
Which is interesting, but from the beginning, Walt had an idea to include a spaceship attraction, right? So all the way back in the original Mickey Mouse Park concept in '51. Uh, but by the time Disneyland was being designed in 1953, the spaceship idea grew into a dedicated future land that was originally called the World of Tomorrow. Tomorrowland sounds much better.
I agree.
The original concept for the World of Tomorrow was pretty grand. Guests would enter on a moving sidewalk, and then the land would include a suspended monorail, a submarine, a flying saucer, a children's car ride, a house of the future, and a futuristic restaurant. And the signature attraction was supposed to be a rocket spaceship attraction that would simulate flight to the moon.
Despite all these big ideas, Tomorrowland was treated as an afterthought through most of Disneyland's development. For time and budget reasons, almost everything was cut from the original 1953 concept. The only attractions they were able to move forward with were the rocket simulator and the children's car ride. They also decided to add exhibition halls for companies to showcase their products. Tomorrowland would invite forward thinking companies to an exhibition space like the ones in the World's Fairs of the day. It was actually inspired by two of the fairs Walt had attended in the 30s, the Century of Progress Fair in Chicago from 1933 and the Golden Gate International Exhibition in San Francisco in 1939.
I really wish we did those fairs. It'd be fun.
I know. They're probably all in Japan now if they do them.
I have no idea. But back to 1954, in June, Disneyland construction began, and famously, Walt wanted the park to open a year later. So construction quickly ran over budget, and they were running out of time. So at first, Walt had reluctantly agreed to hold off on finishing Tomorrowland in time for the opening, so that his team could focus on getting the rest of the park ready. Meanwhile, though, he continued generating buzz for Tomorrowland on the Disneyland TV show. So in January 1955, he changed his mind, and suddenly his team had to get Tomorrowland ready to open with the rest of the park, which sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Wet Enterprises got back to work figuring out how to build the entire land in 6 months.
Yep. So, Tomorrowland was the last land to complete construction, and several of its attractions were not yet ready to open with the rest of the park on July 17th, 1955. It was beautifully designed and looked great, but under the surface there really wasn't that much to do when the park opened. Like we mentioned earlier, most of the initial Tomorrowland attractions were actually corporate exhibits, held in two large exhibition halls at the entrance to the land. WED was so desperate to fill the land that they basically gave these spots to any company who said yes. And since they were trying to do this on the cheap, WED also secured corporate sponsors for their major attractions as well. The exhibits included things such as the Monsanto Hall of Chemistry and the Dutch Boy Paint Gallery.
Mhm.
There was another one about just like dairy farming and milk, and there's one about aluminum. It's really hard to find information on this. Uh, they were, I guess, not super worth documenting, so there's not a whole lot on what the exhibition halls were like. But there was one big empty exhibition space that they decided to just fill with an exhibit of sets and props from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which had just come out in 1954. And that actually hung in there for a really long time, and they put like the actual Nautilus set, and that was pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's cool.
So if you want to look up that, you can. But I decided to focus the bulk of this episode on the attractions specifically, not the exhibits. So let's get into these mostly extinct Disneyland attractions. Gonzalo, why don't you start us off?
Okay, well then, if I'm going to talk first, we should start with Autopia, one of the few remaining Disneyland attractions that opened with the park on July 17th, 1955, and the only remaining opening day attraction in Tomorrowland. So guests steer specially designed cars that only drive 7 miles an hour around a scenic 0.4 mile long enclosed track. The miniature cars were designed by Imagineer Bob Gurr. And now Bob designed a lot of ride vehicles for Disney, including the Doom buggies in the Haunted Mansion, and some others we'll tell you later in this episode. When it opened, it represented the future of what would become America's multi-lane highways, which were still being developed at the time. We'll talk a little bit about the interstate highway system in episode 67, MCM Motels. Early tests before the park opened quickly showed a problem. Aggressive driving caused constant collisions that nearly wrecked the cars. Eventually, spring loaded bumpers were added to help cut down on impacts. The first Autopia cars, called Mark I, took such a beating from the guests that the entire fleet had to be replaced 4 times between 1955 and 1959, which is insane. The Mark VI debuted in 1964, and about a year later, guide rails were finally added, dramatically extending the car's lifespan.
The guide rails are actually down the middle of the lanes so that your tires can't go too far to the left or the right,
Mm.
which now makes it a lot easier for children to steer. Uh, so, because they can't like just take the car and run into the wall and then get stuck and start crying like used to happen.
Because of that change, the Mark VII fleet, introduced in 1967, lasted more than 30 years before retiring in 1999. And the replacements, the Mark VIII cars, are still running today.
Up next, we've got Circarama, a Circle Vision 360 experience. This was another opening day attraction, and Circle Vision 360 is a film technique that was not invented by the Walt Disney Company, but they did refine it. Essentially, you film something using 9 cameras, and then you play the film on 9 screens arranged in a circle. And by using an odd number of screens and a small space between them, a projector can be placed in each gap, and it projects across the space to a screen across
Oh.
from it in a circle. So, and all of these screens and projectors are arranged above head level, and then handbars are provided for the viewers to hold or lean to while standing to view the film. Yes, you have to stand to view these films.
Well, that way you can walk around, you can move your body.
Yeah, so you can like turn around and actually look at the whole thing. So you're like basically standing and spinning the whole time. It is pretty cool though. Neither of the U.S. castle parks have Circle Vision theaters anymore, but Epcot has 2, one in the Canada Pavilion and one in the China Pavilion in World Showcase.
Cool.
The first film shown in the Circarama Theater was called A Tour of the West, and it was sponsored by American Motors, and it highlighted scenes of the American West in the present and recent past, and the idea was to showcase present life in America, the birthplace of much of the innovation that inspired the world of tomorrow. So, future technology, past nostalgia, was basically what that first film was about. And then in the
Yeah.
1960s, we got a new film called America the Beautiful, which was sponsored by Bell Telephone System. And this film contains sweeping views of the American landscape from New England harbors to Midwestern farms, western deserts, and urban skylines. The runtime was approximately 18 minutes, and the experience was free to all guests.
Ooh, look at Ma Bell doing stuff.
This film also included some Easter eggs, such as a man tripping and falling and then getting back up and looking around sheepishly, hoping no one saw him. That made it into the final film. And Walt Disney was actually visible in many scenes watching the filming from the shadows.
That's
So
cool.
that was something cool for people to look through.
The next one up, another opening day attraction from 55, Space Station X1. Now, this was the last non-exhibit opening day attraction. There's not a lot of information out there on this one because it closed pretty quickly in February of 1960. Now, Space Station X1 was a walkthrough attraction where the guests experienced the illusion of orbiting Earth in a space station. Guests stepped into the space station, which was a large, rounded room, traveling across the United States from sunrise on the East Coast to sunset on the West Coast. The entire experience took about 3 minutes. This was an A-ticket attraction in the ticket books. Just a reminder that back in the day, Disneyland admission was only $1 for adults and 50 cents for children. Instead of charging higher for admission, they charged per attraction by selling ticket books. Rides, shows, and transportation vehicles were designed a letter, A through E. Letter A attraction were the less popular, smaller attractions, and cost the least. Each tier featured increasingly popular or headlining attractions through E, the most sought after attractions in the park.
And that was it. Those were the only opening day attractions.
And thanks for flying to us today.
So the next attraction that opened, I'm just going to go through everything in chronological order now. So the next chronological attraction to open was Rocket to the Moon on July 22nd, 1955. It's actually considered an opening day attraction, but it wasn't open on opening day. It didn't open until 5 days later, but the facade was complete, including the major park icon, the Moonliner, which stood 76 feet tall. The Moonliner was the tallest structure in the park on opening day, outmatching Sleeping Beauty Castle by 8 feet.
Wow.
It was designed by Imagineer John Hench and rocket scientist Werner von Braun, inspired by von Braun's V2 rocket design.
Ooh.
The Rocket to the Moon attraction was also sponsored by TWA, so it had a red and white color scheme and the TWA logo on the front.
I love that. I miss that type of like airline, like TWA, Pan Am.
Yeah, they were
Uh,
not shy about getting corporate sponsorships, and they let their logos be as big as they want. And
But yeah,
luckily, all of those companies had good taste. So yeah, while the Moonlighter itself was probably the coolest thing, the attraction itself was also pretty nifty. So it was a circular theater with tiered seating and two circular screens, one on the floor in the center of the room and one on the ceiling. So the bottom
hmm.
screen showed where guests had been, and the top screen shows guests their destination, the moon. So as riders ascended towards the moon on the top screen, the bottom screen depicted the launch pad fading away, and then Anaheim, and then Southern California, and then the United States, and eventually Earth itself.
Oh,
And then
that's
the
cool.
process worked in reverse as the rocket headed back towards Earth.
Go for
The
it.
attraction was updated with a new video and experience in 1967, and then again in 1975, before it finally closed forever in 1992. This attraction space is now home to a Pizza Planet themed restaurant inspired by the Toy Story franchise. The original Moonliner is sadly gone, but they replaced it with a one-third scaled down version as a little tribute.
Why? Just keep the regular one. And there's still a spaceship in Pizza Planet.
Yeah, it was just so big, I think, was the problem. It was just.
Yeah, I don't see a problem.
This attraction was also built in Walt Disney World's Tomorrowland in 1971, and they also started with a Flight to the Moon experience before changing to Mission to Mars with Disneyland in 1975. Walt Disney World's version closed in 1993 and reopened a year later as the Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter, which was a totally outrageous attraction that they would never ever make today. But alas, since it's so far out of our timeline, I can't tell you more about it. But it's nuts, and you should look it up if you don't know what it was.
It's really cool, and go Google. Okay, but let's get back to Earth, literally, and talk about the Tomorrowland boats from July 1955. This is an attraction that gave guests a tour around Tomorrowland's lagoon. Guests boarded into a 3 to 4 person boat and went on a tour around the lagoon. After a few minutes on the tour, guests docked their boats and went back into the northern part of Tomorrowland. Now, Tomorrowland Boats was supposed to be one of Disneyland's main attractions, but unfortunately, guests were not impressed. Only 450 riders boarded onto the boats on the first day. And after a month of troubled operations and constant breakdowns, the attraction itself was closed for a brief refurbishment. On August 16th, 1955, the attraction reopened as Tomorrowland Phantom Boats. The ride was identical to the previous version, but new boats were designed with bold colors and exaggerated wings to make boats look futuristic to match the Tomorrowland theme. Now, the boats had a problem where the engines would fail from guests cranking the gas, which caused the engines to overheat, so cast members constantly had to evacuate the guests onto the dock. After a year, Phantom Boats permanently closed, and the lagoon will eventually become home to the submarine voyage, but more on that later.
The next Tomorrowland attraction to open was the Disneyland Skyway. So the Skyway was the first aerial ropeway in the United States when it opened in 1956. This was built by Von Roll Limited of Bern, Switzerland, and it was a D-ticket attraction that shuttled guests between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. A few years later, the Skyway temporarily closed to accommodate construction of the Matterhorn bobsleds attraction. They actually built a tunnel into the Matterhorn mountain for the Skyway to pass through. More on the Matterhorn later.
Hmm.
In 1965, the attraction's original round two-seater buckets were replaced by rectangular four-seater buckets designed by, yes, Imagineer Bob Gurr, which doubled capacity. The Skyway ran until 1994 when it closed for what the Disney company is saying are two reasons. One, it took too many cast members to operate, and the company needed more hands to operate newer attractions. And also, apparently, the big tunnel was starting to stress the metal frame of the Matterhorn, and so it required a lot of constant, expensive maintenance. And once the Skyway closed, the tunnel openings were partially filled in, so now the Matterhorn's a little bit more stable and easier to maintain.
Hmm.
In 2019, Disney opened a very similar aerial gondola system at Walt Disney World as an actual transportation system. The Skyliner connects Disney's Art of Animation Resort, Disney's Pop Century Resort, and Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort with Disney's Hollywood Studios and the International Gateway at Epcot.
Well, and what's really cool about them, though, is that Von Roll Limited of Bern, Switzerland, also designed the gondola system at Astroworld in Houston.
Did they?
So so if you ever
How
rode
funny,
the
small
gondola
world.
at Astroworld, which is kind of nice because Astroworld, Tomorrowland,
And
and
that's
the
a great
next
way
thing
to
we'll talk about.
transition into the Astro Jets. Look at you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Look at that. The Astrojets, one of the few Tomorrowland attractions that stood the test of time. It's a rocket-themed spinner attraction. Basically, it's Dumbo but with rockets. So I know you guys can picture this in your head. The attraction was made by Klaus Company Bavaria. The jets made a 50-foot circle around a large rocket. Now, guests were able to climb upwards of 36 feet in the ride vehicles from the ground level where they boarded. The attraction originally stood between the submarine voyage and Rocket to the Moon, and the name Astrojets was changed in 1964, where United Airlines, a new park sponsor, decided that the name was free advertising for American Airlines coast-to-coast Astrojet service. So the name was changed to Tomorrowland Jets, and that name lasted until 1966 when the attraction was closed to make room for a new and renovated Tomorrowland. It returned in August of 1967 as the Rocket Jets, and then closed in 1997 for renovations with the rest of Tomorrowland. The new form of the attraction opened in 1998 as Astro Orbiter, and it still exists today.
Yeah, a lot of the rides that are still there from opening day, I'm considering them still there, even if everything got remodeled and closed and reopened over the years, because that happened to a lot of them. But I think that if the ride concept and technology is still there, I say that counts.
Yes, I think so too.
Now we're getting to my actual favorite Extinct Tomorrowland attraction that honestly, I was gonna just make the entire episode on this, but it's really not enough to fill up an entire episode, but very, very cool. And I highly recommend you guys look in our show notes for all of the YouTube videos that I linked, because there's a lot of footage of this attraction that will be more fun to watch than listening to me talk about it. But the attraction that inspired this episode is the Monsanto House of the Future from 1957. It was a full-scale walk-through model house that showcased what a home of the far distant 1986 might look like.
That's insane. That's like saying that like if that was said today, that would have been what the 1990s thought of the future.
Yeah. It opened in 1957 and was designed in collaboration from the Monsanto Company, MIT, and Walt Disney Imagineering. The house they designed was fully functional, even though there was no specific plan for commercial production of the house. The designers were hoping that the bold ideas and new concept would impact other architects and builders. They also included like fully scalable plans, alternate floor
Oh,
plans people could do. Like they built a house and designed it so
nice.
that if someone bought it, like they would have probably sold it to them and like we would be living in these houses. They said that was not the plan, but I feel like they wouldn't have said no if someone had asked. So the house itself was made entirely out of plastic because the designers wanted to show the limitless potential of plastics in structural applications. The basic construction material is plastic reinforced with fibrous glass. The house consists of a 16-foot square center core with U-shaped molded modules. The modules formed the walls of the roof and the floor of the rooms and had wiring conduits and heating ducts molded in. They measured 8 by 16 and are cantilevered in pairs from the central core to form four 16-foot square wings. Because of the wing design, full-day sunlight was available to every part of the house. And this design also kept inter-room noise to a minimum. The house itself contained a living room, a family room, a main bedroom, two smaller children's bedrooms, a kitchen, and two bathrooms. And everything was modular, so rooms could easily and economically, they say, be added, and you could also achieve a variety of floor plans by mixing and matching the design components.
Oh,
So the house itself was pretty much cool enough on its own. Like I would walk around that empty building, but they also filled it with a lot of cool modern technology or future technology that they invented thinking someone else would do one day.
hmm,
And we did. So they had telephones with preset and push button dialing, hands-free speakers with transmitters, and a viewing screen to see the person who's calling.
is it FaceTime much?
Yeah, exactly. Like they thought of FaceTime in 1957. They had a climate control center which filters, cools, heats, and scents the air in each room independently. I wish that we had actually done that one. That would be cool. It'd be like, I wish the kitchen smelled like sugar cookies. And you just like hit a little. Anyway.
Without the work.
Yeah, exactly. They had flat screen TVs with remote controls. The sinks in the bathrooms had adjustable heights, which is pretty cool. And they also had retractable refrigeration space and microwave ovens.
Nice.
But unfortunately, like with all futuristic things back then, the exhibit started to age pretty fast once technology started to catch up to these new ideas. Um, and so the House of the Future closed in December 1967 and was replaced with the Alpine Gardens. But, fun fact, this building was so well made that demolition crews couldn't demolish the house by using wrecking balls, torches, chainsaws, or jackhammers. The building was ultimately demolished by using choker chains to crush it into smaller parts. The structure was so strong that the half-inch steel bolts used to mount it to its foundation broke before the structure itself did.
Wow.
They built a whole house.
I feel like we could use that in the Gulf Coast.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it looks really cool. I mean, I wish I would have. It reminds me of the Diaxiom house by Mr. Fuller,
What year was that
which, if you
made?
haven't looked, 1950s.
Oh, neat. House of the Future is super cool. Go watch the YouTube videos so you can watch people walk around it and play with all of the technology in it in their beautiful outfits. And anyway, it's a great time. But how can Disney possibly top that, you say? Well, Tomorrowland actually got 3 really exciting additions in 1959. So first was the Matterhorn bobsleds. Yes, for some reason, when the Matterhorn opened, it was considered a Tomorrowland attraction. It didn't officially become a Fantasyland attraction until the 1970s. The Matterhorn bobsleds is modeled after the Matterhorn, a mountain in the Swiss Alps. Walt was inspired by a trip to Switzerland while he was filming Third Man on the Mountain. The Matterhorn bobsleds attraction is composed of 2 intertwining steel roller coasters. It's the first tubular steel continuous track roller coaster ever constructed. It is the first tubular steel continuous track roller coaster ever constructed, and because of this, it's considered to be an ACE, American Coaster Enthusiasts, coaster landmark. Yes, that's a thing.
That sounds fake, but also the hot dog and sausage council sounded fake, and apparently that was true. So
The track plan was built by a coaster builder, Aero Development, and was designed by, yep, Bob Gurr, who started working on the attraction in 1958. And he said that it was the hardest project that he's ever worked on. The steel structure was constructed by the American Bridge Company, the same company that built the Bay Bridge that connects Oakland to San Francisco in California. For the mountain itself, the Imagineers used forced perspective to make the mountain seem larger than it really is, with techniques like making the trees at higher altitudes smaller. It has waterfalls down the sides that spray riders as they pass by, and the mountain has holes in its exterior through which the bobsleds exit and re-enter throughout the ride. And we mentioned earlier that the Skyway actually passed through the center of the mountain, and Skyway riders could see down into the Matterhorn's interior as they glided through. The Matterhorn has gone through plenty of updates and refurbishments, but is still open today.
I'm glad it is, because the Matterhorn is like the classic Disney. Like, yeah, you think of Disney like Disney stuff, but if you think of Disney parks as amusement parks,
Mm-hmm.
the Matterhorn is what like comes to mind, at least for me.
Yeah, me too.
So, in the image of the Skyway going through the Matterhorn mountain, like, to me that's also like kind of iconic. So
It is. It really is. I think that's so cool because they came up with the idea for the Matterhorn after the Skyway was already there, and instead of saying like, "Oh, we got to close the Skyway," they're like, "No, we'll build around it. It'll be fine."
see, and that's what modern day Imagineers need to start looking at that
Yeah.
precedent right there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, so that's one of the new attractions that you think might not be able to top off the next one. This is such a great transition. I'm loving this. But we're going to talk about another one from 1959 called Submarine Voyage. Now, Submarine Voyage through Liquid Space, known simply as Submarine Voyage, was an e-ticket attraction that opened in June 1959. Like we mentioned earlier, the Submarine Voyage was created to replace the extremely unreliable, and let me just go ahead and give you my 2 cents, boring sounding Phantom boats at Tomorrowland. WED commissioned 8 submarines for the attraction. Disney called them one of the world's largest peacetime submarine fleets. The submarines were each 52 feet long and weighed 94,000 pounds. They could seat 38 guests at a time and traveled at a maximum speed of 1.7 miles per hour. They cost 80,000 each to build in 1959. Now, today's money, that's about $890,000 each. Now, the submarines were built at Todd Shipyards in San Pedro, California, then transported to the Disneyland Naval Yard, in Anaheim for outfitting under the direction of retired Admiral Joe Fowler. I love that Disney had a naval yard.
I know, like they
Is this where they
got
built the
really
Phantom
into
boats?
this. Like they really wanted to do it on the up and up, and they're like, we're commissioning submarines. We're calling this a peacetime fleet. We're getting the admiral involved. Like they went all in. It was pretty. I like it.
Technical data and advice regarding the design were provided by General Dynamics Electric Boat Division, which was the first company in the world to manufacture submarines, and the company that built all of the U.S. Navy's nuclear-powered subs. In fact, the Disneyland submarines were originally named after the U.S. Navy's atomic submarines: the Nautilus, the Seawolf, the Skate, the Titran, the Ethan Allen, the Patrick Henry, the Skipjack, and the George Washington. So the ride starts as an innocent journey through an underwater field of fish and ocean vegetation, but quickly turned into an adventurous encounter with sea serpents and giant squids. Guests on the submarine voyage would also pass over an underwater volcano, lost treasure, and a graveyard of lost ships, and the legendary lost continent of Atlantis. As the ride progressed, you'd see bubbles traveling diagonally upwards, starting at the bottom right corner of each submarine's porthole to simulate the effect of going deeper into the ocean at each turn. The submarine voyage got a makeover in the 1980s, where the subs were painted yellow submarine, but the attraction closed in 1998. The submarine voyage was close due to its age, low hourly capacity, aged effects, and high maintenance and labor costs. A decommissioning ceremony was held, where the attraction's flag was lowered for the last time and presented to Donald Duck. Oh, that's cool, because he was an actual admiral in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
The lagoon sat empty and the subs were dry docked for years until the attraction finally reopened as the Finding Nemo submarine voyage in 2007. It uses the submarine vehicles and track layout. That's cool. But the submarines weren't underwater.
They were.
So the area
They
was
built.
submerged? So
Yeah, the entire area, they just go around the lagoon. So they come up, you board them, and then they go down. They don't go
oh.
completely submerged. Like the top like quarter of the sub is above the water, so you can see them.
Yeah, but you can't
Like
tell from inside.
yeah, from
Yeah.
inside it looks like you're completely underwater, and then with the bubble effect,
Oh,
it
that's cool.
feels like you're diving. I've been on the Finding Nemo version. It's pretty
Oh,
cute.
cool. Nice.
It's weird because you are just like sitting in a full metal tube with 37 strangers, like right up, like, and the seats are like everyone sits on a bench down the center of the submarine where your legs facing the portholes on the sides. So your like back is to
Mm-hmm.
the person behind you's back,
Mm-hmm,
and you're
mm-hmm,
both
mm-hmm.
looking outwards. Like that's how it is, and then you just go around the lagoon, and look at all these audio animatronics, and they pipe in the audio.
Okay.
Yep, the whole thing's underwater. It's very, very cool.
Cool.
Another expensive ride vehicle, and probably one of the most iconic things that Disneyland ever invented, is the Disneyland Alweg monorail system, which opened on June 14th, 1959. And this is the first permanent monorail system in the entire Western Hemisphere, though when it opened it was just a sightseeing attraction around Tomorrowland. Alweg built the Beamway, but the Mark I trains were built at the Disney studio by, you guessed it, Bob Gurr, and ran
Bob
from
Gurr.
1959 to 1961. The fleet consisted of two trains, Monorail Red and Monorail Blue, which each consisted of only 3 cars. In 1961, the track was extended to 2.5 miles to transport guests to and from the Disneyland Hotel, and the attraction became an actual transportation system. The 2 monorails from the Mark I fleet were modified by Disney Studios to become Mark II trains and were joined by a 3rd train, Monorail Yellow. To accommodate the increased capacity necessary to transport guests between Tomorrowland and the Disneyland Hotel, the number of cars per train was increased from 3 to 4, which required the Tomorrowland station to be lengthened. The bubble dome on top of each end car was larger than those of the Mark I cars, but otherwise the trains were cosmetically very similar to their predecessors. The trains got one last Alweg-sponsored refurb in 1969. The Mark III trains were completely rebuilt to be more streamlined and efficient, and the lengths of the trains were increased to 137 feet. Walt Disney World's monorail system opened with the park in 1971, and they received Mark IV versions of the trains. And from then on, each version of the trains would alternate parks. So Disneyland got Mark V, Disney World got Mark VI, which is the version that's still running since 1989.
Hmm.
And then Disneyland got the Mark VII, which is still running since 2008. The
Nice.
Walt Disney World monorail system is actually the largest of the 3 Alweg-type Disney monorail systems around the world, and it consists of 3 lines and spans 14.7 miles.
Nice. I have written one of the Alweg type Disney Monoland roll rails, but not in Disney because I rode the one that's in Seattle that opened
Yeah,
for the 1962 World Fair. And it's actually really cool. So,
it is really cool. I love the monorail. It is, to me, like you're not on a Disney vacation until you've been on a monorail. It just really feels
true.
like home to me.
True. I just love the idea of monorails and like that mode of transportation. Like Houston's monorail doesn't exist anymore, but it was the one that had like that was actually controlled from the top,
Mhm.
like the monorails on the top, and the car hung underneath the track. Um, and Disneyland and well, I guess Disney Wed really has like their influence throughout the world because okay, yeah, Alweg type Disney monorail systems like the one in 1962 used for the Seattle World's Fair, but then also the Disney People Mover. You can find one of those at the Bush Airport in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Just from this. And that's why I thought, like, honestly, we spent this whole hour talking about one tiny 10-year chunk of Disneyland history, and look at all of the stuff that we covered.
yes,
So,
yes,
as my connection to today's segment, I thought it'd be fun to see how the land in 1959 compared to Walt's original plan for the World of Tomorrow back when he was planning Disneyland in 1953. So, here are the
okay, let's see.
attractions he included. We mentioned all of these at the top. So, the attractions he included in the original concept art were a suspended monorail, check. A submarine, check. A flying saucer, no. A children's car ride,
Womp womp.
check. A house of the future, check. A futuristic restaurant, no. A rocket spaceship attraction that would simulate a flight to the moon, check. So in just 5 years, Walt basically achieved his entire original vision. Autopia, the Matterhorn, an expanded monorail system, a version of the Astrojets, a version of the submarine voyage, are still around today. Plus, a lot of technology that debuted in Tomorrowland, like Circle Vision 360 and the Skyways aerial ropeway, are still being used in Disney parks around the world. It's really incredible what Walt and his team were able to create back then. Walt Disney was a true visionary, and his team of Imagineers were the best in the world, and that's why we're going to keep talking about him on this podcast forever.
Yes, forever. But also, you could argue that where the rocket ship used to be is now the Pizza Planet, and you could, I guess, argue that that is kind of like a futuristic restaurant, and also kind of like a flying saucer
That's true. They
somehow.
did eventually get a futuristic restaurant.
Yeah.
And there is a flying saucer adjacent attraction at Hollywood Studios and Toy Story Land. So I guess we have Toy Story to thank for completing Walt's vision. Anybody who sends us a selfie next to the rocket outside of Pizza Planet will get posted on the page. So send us some
Yeah.
selfies.
Yes. And with that, it looks like the monorail has finally reached our station here. So please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejados de las puertas. And also, thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend.
You can also follow us on YouTube and Instagram at MCL Podcast. Instagram is the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions. Send us a DM anytime. You can also connect to us through the Send Us a Text Message feature in the show notes.
Yes, so send us some fan mail, and thanks for listening.
See you real soon.
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.